going to garner a lot of interest. Talk about actual wines that we select for Pesach, right?
Yeah, well, I think we got some feedback also from some loyal listeners, and thank you for that feedback because it matters a lot to us. You should know that your feedback, your emails, your messages, they matter a lot to us, and we take them seriously. And so, therefore, I think this is the right thing to do. Our actual picks for Pesach 2024.
Yeah, I think we were just like, I don't know, we were beating around the bush a little bit with that last time, and I'm like, yeah, let's do some actual wines. What are we drinking? I mean, this is what we're here for, right? I mean, I know people are going to be interested to hear this stuff. I know people ask me this every year. So, it probably is worthwhile to put a little bit of elbow grease into this podcast and like spend a little bit of time preparing for it. So and who doesn't like thinking about wine they're going to drink? I do. So we just went a little bit early and chose our wines for Pesach. Now, Yisroel, why don't you give the guidelines we discussed as to? Now, I'll just say beforehand, neither of us told each other what we chose, so this is all going to be a surprise to each of us. But why don't you give our guidelines of how we chose what we chose?
So I'll just tell you what I did. I always do this before the Seder. I go down to my cellar. I know my cellar is filled with wines that I like. So that's already a start.
That makes sense. That's a good building block.
And then I look at and say, well, what would be good for the Seder? Now, this year, the guideline was Israeli only, and you and I are in agreement on this. No one in the diaspora should be drinking wine that is not Israeli at their Seder. So I will opposite. Everyone should be drinking Israeli wine at their Seder.
I agree. Yeah, I think there's kind of like somewhat of a become a custom. A lot of people do it for the fourth cup and things like that, but this year, let's do it for all of our cups and all of our Sidarim. It's a beautiful thing, and there's no reason not to when these are great wines.
It's the least that we can do. The least
it really is the least we could do. It really is.
And you and I both know intimately that the Israeli wine industry is having a very hard time this year. And so for us in the diaspora, if we're able to afford a nicer wine, please buy it from Israel. It really helps them. It really supports those winemakers.
Right. And as nice as it is to go to your cellar and choose one, that's already been bought. Go to the store and buy more, for sure.
Oh, now you're getting back at me?
No, we're both doing the same thing. These are wines from my cellar too, but they have to be replaced, don't they?
Yes, they do have to replace. So I definitely plan on doing some purchasing before Pesach, and it will be Israeli wine. Okay, with that, so what we decided to do is, at least this is what I was looking at, and Kenny, you can tell us if you were looking at something the same. I was looking at best value for the price range. So we set a $20-ish range, kind of like a $40-50-ish range, a $70-80, and then right? No, sorry. We did a 20, a 40, a 60, an 80, and then a Moshiach wine.
Well, I did up to 20, between 20 and 40, between 40 and 80, over 80, and then the Moshiach wines, which is almost exactly what you said. But I was very specific. If it was 21, that's the 20 to 40. So
I did something really similar, though I often actually do put prices that I have a little sticker sheet, and what I paid for it on the top of the bottle. I can even show you like what it looks like. Like literally, I put a little sticker on top of my bottle.
Interesting.
That's how I store my wine, so that way I can actually look at it and know how much I paid for that bottle.
Well, I have all of my bottles actually in Cellar Tracker, and when I enter it, I put what I paid for it in there, so I know. If you don't use that, it's really great. In fact, sometime I want to get that guy on this podcast, Eric Levine, who drinks kosher wine, and he's a very interesting guy. He's the guy that started that.
I would love to see him.
Yeah, I'm going to use this as I'll tell him he's on this. We got to get him on. But anyway, that's a great tool for that. And also, if you have any reasonable amount of wine in your cellar, it's really good to keep track of. But that's a good technique too. Old school, sticker on top.
Yeah, a little more old school. And you know what? Maybe this is my impetus to start with Cellar Tracker. I've never done it, but I should.
Yeah, it's like when it seemed. I was nervous to do it because I'm like, am I really going to spend that much time like cataloging every single bottle? But it took me. I went down there on breaks. I did this part, and I did this part, and I did it over like a couple months, and it's so worthwhile once you have it in there. It's really like
It's a
it's
lot of
great.
work. It's a
Yeah,
lot.
it is. But again, this is not hard work.
So if you're just starting your cellar, you should do it, because
Oh
once
yeah,
you have a couple of bottles in your cellar, it's going to get harder.
absolutely.
Okay.
But it's a good. So let's dive in. Let's dive in.
Pesach 2024. This is our first major event of this kosher wine podcast. Our picks.
That's right. These are our 2024 picks. And I wanted to mention before, and I was just telling my wife recently that we're about to do this podcast, and she's like, you should mention that you guys met each other on Pesach regarding wine. Which I don't think we discussed that, but that is where we met each other, over wine on Pesach.
It is true. We have not discussed this,
So
how we actually met each other. How many years ago was it now?
I would guess 6 to 8 in that range. Six,
Yeah,
7,
maybe, yeah, something like that.
something like that. But no, that was just like a side thing. I did want to mention that because it's apropos. It's his
Yeah,
Pesach. We're talking wine. This is how we got together in the first
this
place.
is our friend anniversary.
Correct. Anniversary. So why don't we start with the lowest priced ones, and we'll work our way up from there, and we'll go back and forth. You could say yours. Why don't you say yours first? You're under. I did it under 20. I
Mine,
think we originally talked under 15, but then I was like, I think under 20 is more reasonable.
mine's under 20, and it's one I think you're going to be surprised. It's my only Mavusha wine of all of my picks, and I chose the Tepperberg Vision 2021 Malbec. I think that I'm not a huge fan of Tepperberg in general. I'm just going to be honest with that. But their Vision Malbec is something really special, and especially their 2021 vintage. And again, I'm thinking of the Seder. I'm thinking of an easy drinking wine. A Malbec is an easy drinking wine, smooth tannins. It's this one is not expensive. For those of you who care about Hechsher, it has a Badat Yerushalayim, Eda Haredis, so that maybe matters for some people that are listening. And I can see your face already. You're like, why?
No, I'm not. I'm not. First of all, I did not. I will not be saying which Hechsher is on each bottle.
No,
I have no idea. So you can choose for yourself. But no, that's an interesting pick. I didn't see that coming. That's always it's a staple wine you see in a lot of places. You know where I see the Tepperberg Vision at the Shul in Surfside. I think the rabbi there always has Tepperberg Vision. Like no, it's Binyamina. I'm sorry, but maybe also Tepperberg Vision. But the bottle I always see there is Binyamina.
but
Sorry, that was an off-topic thing. But that's like Tepperberg Vision is kind of, it's a very available bottle, right? I mean, you could get that basically anywhere.
really anywhere. And I
Yeah.
have to say, specifically the Malbec. I'm not crazy about the Merlot. The Malbec Vision, it's a really nice flavor, and I think it's a really nice Seder wine. And
I have to say that I told the winemaker Shuki himself this, and he was I don't think he wanted to hear that, but I said I've always been like a little confused by their naming, all their names and whatever. I don't know why, and he's like, why? And I'm like, you know what? I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but I always like get confused by which is which, and like, but the Vision is that kind of like entry line of Tepperbergs, right?
that is, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no, good pick. I wouldn't pick it, but that's your pick. So I did stick, as you mentioned. You said that's your only Mavushal one. I didn't pick any Mavushal wines. I kind of kept that in my head, not to specifically. And the reality is, if I would have picked a Mavushal wine, I would have picked one of the least expensive wines on the market, which I always push to people. It's like $10, and that's the Carmel Mediterranean blend or whatever it's called. It's like $10. But forget that one because I went non-Mavushal. I chose the Gilgal Pinot Noir.
Oh,
Rec-
interesting.
yeah, so I think it's really good wine. I've written about it a couple times. It's First of all, I think Pinot Noir is a good choice in general for Seder because it is a lighter bodied wine. It's the lightest body wine of a lot of these that we're going to talk about. Also didn't want to pick all Pinot Noir because that would have been too easy.
Right.
But it's just a really nice wine, almost year in and year out. That line, that Gilgal line, which I think in Israel is called Gamla. I'm not sure if they still do that. In Israel, they call it Gamla, and in America, they call it Gilgal, and it's made by Golan Heights Winery. Am I making that up? No, that is correct. It's
Yes,
made by Golan Heights Winery, and that they have really good value wines at that about that price range. And it's the reason I told you I wanted to make it under 20, not under 15, as I mentioned right before we started, was because nowadays that falls in at about 16 to 18. You may even find it closer to 20. It still is under 20 though. It used to really be cheap, but it's a like a balanced, and there's always like good acid in there, and it's an
yeah.
easy drinking good wine. And I think like that's a suggestion year round, but I think it's really ideal for Pesach. So that would be my under 20
That is a great pick. I am on board with that pick. And I would say also the Pinot, people don't know this. The Pinot is the hardest wine to make. And
Yeah,
they do consistently. Go on Heights does a great job with that Gilgal Pinot. I mean,
it's a
one
good
of the
point. It's,
one
yeah,
of those where no matter which vintage you get, you're going to get a good bottle from that Pinot.
I agree. I think it's just it's something I always come back to. And one of the first, as soon as it comes out every year, I try to grab it and taste it. And I don't remember recently being let down. So that would be my pick for that.
Okay.
So I will jump into the next one. We can do the snake method
Yes, I like this.
and and so interestingly, in my 20 to 40 range could have been 20 to 25 really because I chose the Vitkin Israeli Journey.
It's a great bottle.
I
Great
I, I
pick.
love it, and it's something I always stock up on because I think it's not only, by the way, to back up for a second with the Gilgal Pinot Noir, also, it's while you want to drink that relatively quickly, that has some life. You can cellar that at least for a couple of years, a few years. It'll even evolve a little bit. And I think the same thing is true with the Vitkin Journey. The Vitkin Journey is a blend. It calls it Israeli Journey. It's got a bunch of grapes in it. I think it's Carignan, Syrah, Grenache style
Mhm.
type of wine, but it's very balanced. It's low in alcohol, also. I think like maybe it's I don't have it in front of me, but it's like a lower alcohol wine, so it's not going to be your heavy duty like smack you in the face wine. But it also has, and this is where you get into the next level of wines. It shows like a complexity. It shows different layering, and it's not just oh this is nice and simple and it's great with food. This is a more serious wine, and yet it's I think about $25 now. Also has gone up like everything in the world, but that's I think that's going to be my 20 to 40 pick, but really like I said it could have been 20 to 25. It's very hard to pick one wine in these categories, but we
Right.
had to, and I like the challenge of doing that, and I'm comfortable with this. And not only because if, honestly if this were 35 I would have chosen it also. So I didn't only pick this because it's $25. I think it's really really good wine.
I think for an entry level Israeli wine, Vitkin Journey is a fantastic pick. Okay. This I actually went on the higher end of the 20 to 40. This one comes in just under $40. And a wine that I really love, I pulled out of my cellar, the Louis Pascoe Project, the BDX. I happen to like the 2019 vintage. And what's interesting about Louis Pascoe is he started doing these in 2014. He makes it at the Bet El Winery. He's also the main winemaker at Tishbe, or at the time he was, at least. And this is an interesting bottle because it is a Bordeaux blend. So because of that, it is a little bit of a lighter wine, though it's 50% Cab. It's 34% Merlot. It has some Cab Franc, Petit Verdot, and Petit Syrah in it. It's a really nice, very smooth tannins, very easy to drink, and that's why I chose it.
I think it's a great choice. Lewis is one of the more interesting winemakers you're going to meet. A genius guy, great stories, and he's a great winemaker. I have to be honest, I haven't had any Pascos in a number of years, and I keep telling myself I got to get my hands on some. So that's good. That's a good
It,
impetus for me to go and pick one out in my next order.
they're,
Um,
they're really like he does such a good job because it's like that's his wine, right? He doesn't
right,
come up with many different types of wines. He comes
right,
up with one or maybe two. Sometimes he has one called the Liquidity that comes
right,
out as well. And this is really his wine. They're spicy, they're earthy, they
right.
have really good nuances, not too much oak. I think he just leaves it 9 months in French oak. So there's not very oaky. The many Israeli wines are a little too oaky for my liking. And I think for a Seder, you want something that's going to be even like that. And he does a great job. And if you get your hands on the 2019, I love the 2019.
That's a great choice. Well, you're
Okay.
up next in our snake method.
In our snake method. Okay. So here's another one. So again, and you'll notice this, I am choosing um 2018s and 2019s and 2020s. I think those are really drinking well,
Hmm.
especially from Israel. So I did purposely choose these vintages for this year because I think their drinking window is now. So here's a 2018, and this is from Dalton. And in general, I'll tell you about Dalton. They make consistently great wine at great values. So this is the Elkosh, the single vineyard Elkosh Shiraz. And I chose a Shiraz because the Shiraz also is a lighter wine. It's a little fruitier. It's a little easier to drink. I could see this like for a second or third glass when you want something that's a really nice wine, but not too high. And this one, funny enough, I had to now go between 40 and 60, and I was able to go. This is the lower end of 40, where the other one was like
I was going to ask you what that retails at. That's the lower end of 40s.
the
Yeah.
lower end. It's like around $45 to $50, depending on where you get it.
Right.
And I love it's a single vineyard. They're all Shiraz grapes. They're from the obviously Dalton is in the Galilee, so it's the Galilee. And what I always notice in this particular wine is the it's very black cherry, and I happen to personally like black cherry, that kind of flavor. And this one really shows it strongly. Like there's like when you open it up, it just hits you in your face with the black.
Hmm. It's funny because a black cherry would be my note for my next wine too.
Okay.
But something quickly about my next wine that I'm going to tie to your last wine is that my next wine is a Recanati. Pasco was at Tishbe, but he was also a Recanati. I think he's not at Tishbe for a number of years. He's been independent, I think, but I do know that he was at Tishbe, like you said, and he was also a Recanati. I reached out to him recently about a very old Recanati that I had, just to tell him I had it and that I was excited to drink it because I knew he was the winemaker then. My choice here is the Recanati Reserve Wild Carignan.
Oh, I
And
love that bottle.
I haven't really been mentioning vintages, but this would be the 2020 is current vintage. My previous one's the Journey. I think it's the 21 or 22 that's out now. That wouldn't be 22. It would be 21 because 23 is not out yet and 22 is Shemitah. So that's the 21 you'll be able to see. And the Gilgal that I mentioned first, you can get the 23 is already out. So just to cover back to that. But the Recanati Reserve Wild Carignan, I my difficulty here was choosing which one of these Recanati reserves I wanted to pick because I love really all of them almost year in and year out. There are years where that may not be my favorite, but the Wild Carignan I think is just almost annually also again really great. Also, the second part of that Recanati, because they're such good value wines, it's hard to get into this category where we're at now of 40 to 80. This I think it's retails for about $50, so the lower end of that. But a lot of those Recanati reserves are $30. You know, the Merlot, the Cabs, that line of the reserve, which are all really good. But I chose this because I always think this is a special wine. And it's funny you mentioned the black cherry because I always think black cherry with this wine.
Yes.
Um, and Carignan is an interesting grape for Israel, and I've still kind of been waiting for it to really, really take off. The reason it's so great in Israel is because it's a late ripening wine, and because it's a warmer climate, it really can thrive in Israel. And I think that is why you see it there. But I think it can almost like become like a real staple. I mean, it makes more sense to me than something like Merlot. You know, Carignan really makes sense in a warm climate, and Recanati just does a great job with it. And that would be my pick. Retails for about $50. The Recanati 2020 Wild Carignan.
I love that Wild Carignan, and a great pick.
Thank you. You've been very complimentary about my picks. I
No,
feel like I'm not being equally complimentary.
No, but I do like them.
I think your picks are terrible. I'll say it. No, I'm kidding. I like your picks too. I like that we didn't discuss these because I'm like surprised. I'm not surprised in like, but these are wines. I like that we're like kind of like thinking of different wineries.
But we also know this because when we started the podcast, our original idea was to have the same wine, and we said that we both have
Right.
different types of wine. So I
Right.
figured that we would both have very different wines
That's true.
picking because that's just what we have access to.
That's true. That's true. Um,
Okay, let me
next.
my wine four,
You
uh,
want? Yes.
and it's interesting. Uh, so I have to. It's so winemakers should note this. You as the winemaker, you could have an effect on a pick. So Jacob Ner David actually, I was talking to him today, and so I opened up my wine fridge and I saw a Jezreel, and I said, "Oh, I just gravitated towards it. I can't." But actually, it makes sense. So this is the Jezreel Argaman. I think if you are choosing a Israeli wine for this year, you should choose an indigenous Israeli grape. And the Jezreel Argaman 2020 is as indigenous as the Israeli wine gets. It's a great bottle of wine. It's from a vineyard in Givat Nili, and the what's unique about the Argaman is that it is indigenous to Israel. It's a grape that was created in Israel. It's a varietal. What they do, which is very typical of Israeli wineries, they store it in French oak for 22 months. And it's a lot of oak. You can definitely taste those vanilla flavors. But the Argaman grape and together with that really strong oakiness, again, really even bodied. Tannins are really balanced. And I think that for the 60 to 80 category, this is my pick for this year.
It's a great pick. I'm a little disappointed I didn't pick that myself because I love that idea. I love the idea of picking the Argamon, and Jezreel is a great winery and great people, by the way. Jacob Nerdavid's great. Yaakov, I know them all. They're all great people, and that's a great choice. What is that? That's over $40 the Argamon?
Yeah, I mean, I just looked at kosherwine.com
Yeah.
and it was selling for $64.99.
Okay, fine. Okay. Well, that's a great choice. I really man, I should have thought of that. But anyway, you did, and I'm glad you mentioned it because they deserve mention, and that's a great choice. So
Okay,
you're next. So our last category. I'll explain this more. It's not.
you have a
It,
number four. Why don't we do your number four?
oh, I did my number four. I did not do my number four.
No, you didn't.
I didn't. You're right. I lost track. I chose the Gvaot Masada.
Great choice.
I think so too. The Masada is again that's like annually a great wine. It barely makes it in the. Wait a second. I just want to. This is number four. We're in the 80 plus category now, right? And you have not done yours yet.
No, I didn't do it yet.
Okay, fine. Just making sure. So because it's just a touch over $80, which I'm more than fine with. And again, it's like a wine that I would, consider buying if it were more expensive. I don't want them to hear that, but it's a top notch wine. It drinks the part of an expensive wine. The Masada, I think year in and year out, I may be wrong, but it's a blend of Cab Merlot, Petit Verdot. I think usually like cab based. So it is. I stayed away from those kind of wines in general for like most of the other picks. I stayed to really lighter wines. This is a big wine. Masada is also not a wine you're necessarily going to drink right away. I wouldn't even recommend to drink it right away. So while the 2020 is the one that's available now, if you get your hands on an older vintage, that's where you want it. It's a French oak aged wine. It's a big wine, but it's really a beautiful wine. I would say, you want to be drinking like the 18 now. Like that's where, and you can get those. They're available and they're out there. And again, probably a touch over $80. I wanted to keep to our categories, and I did here. And a beautiful wine. Gvaud is in Shiloh. Shivi Jori, the winemaker, enologist, he's a brilliant guy. He's like a forerunner in a lot of ways of Israel, coming to the forefront in the wine world. and it's great wine. I love this choice, and I love that wine.
Great pick. For my number 4, I chose a wine that is not available on the market anymore. Actually, I recently spoke to the winemaker, and I told him I have a couple bottles of it, and he said, "Can you bring me one? Because I don't have any left." It's the best bottle of wine I ever made. And so I'm going to drink one. I'm going to bring one to him, and I'm going to drink one this Pesach. It's the Yaakov Oria Duke Pontiff 2017.
Oh yeah.
This bottle is just something special. First of all, Yaakov Oria is one of the boldest, maybe today the boldest winemaker in Israel. He is willing to take risks that very few winemakers are willing to take. He is out there. He's working with grapes that few winemakers are working with. The Duke Pontiff here of a 2017, just to give you an idea of what this is. It's 49% Pinot, which you and I both agree is a great Seder wine. It's 21% Syrah, 18% Grenache, and 6% Mourvèdre, and 6% Sinthalt. I mean, when was the last time you saw anyone work with this with any of these? I mean, the Sinthalt grape, I don't think there's anyone else working with it in Israel.
I off the top of my head, I don't know. Yeah, as I've said many times, I call him a mad scientist. He's a tinkerer. He's looking to, I think he once told a story like he thought he had came up with some really interesting thing when he saw someone else doing it. But the fact is, he's always tinkering. He's always trying to, learn. He's experimenting in there, but he's always pushing the limits of what the grape can be really. And isn't that awesome that we have someone doing that? It's amazing. It's amazing, and that's a great choice. It's funny he said that he would love to. I always find that funny that they don't have their own files. Of course, they'd probably rather you have it and they sell it, but
he said, "Oh, 2017 is probably in its window and it's drinking wonderfully." Yeah. I said, "I just had one recently and it is, and I have a few more, and it really is drinking so nicely now. If you have it,
amazing. I very well may. I have a bunch of his wines in my cellar, and they all would have been great choices too. The fact that we chose any of these doesn't really negate anything else. These are the ones that I thought were apropos to this year, and but there's so many to choose from. Oh, and everyone you mentioned is a great choice. So it's
you're such a diplomat.
Well, I think the Oreo wines are great. He really makes like some really unique. I love orange wine. We'll have to do an episode on that once, and like he's the king of that stuff. So okay, so that wraps up our 4 categories. So now we're going to talk about this separate Moshiach wine category. Now, the idea here is that it's not even based on, it could be an inexpensive wine. I'm feeling yours won't be. Mine is not necessarily inexpensive. It's more like a special bottle that you may have lying in your cellar that you're saving for a special occasion, such as Moshiach. So I chose my wine with that in mind, a wine that I have only one of them. You become very attached to your wine sometimes, but but it's like, what are they there for? And the worst sin you can do is let it die in your cellar. That's the worst. I mean, like you drink it too soon is not nearly as bad as when you open a really old special bottle and it's dead and you saved it for so long. You saved it for too long, and that's a sin.
Right.
So, open these bottles. Should I go first with my choice? I think you were up. Why don't let's hear yours. I just wanted to introduce the category.
Okay, so this is a bottle that I pulled. I went into my cellar and I said, "What's the bottle?" And like you, I agree. I'm so attached to these bottles because some of these bottles I've been sitting on. So this is a bottle I've been sitting on for 12 years. An Israeli bottle that I've been sitting on. And you and I both agree that there's not many Israeli bottles that you will sit on for 12 years. But this one, I just pulled out of my cellar. And you're wondering, what is it?
I already know what it is because I am on video and I can see the box.
Oh, really?
You know what? I don't know which one, but I don't want to guess. You say. I know. I think I know what it is.
One of the few bottles that you could, in my opinion, store, and this is the Flam Nobel 2010.
Well, that is what I thought it was in 2010. Woo!
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I think it's ready to drink now.
Absolutely is.
And I think
I've had it relatively recent, and absolutely. I mean, I think is the ideal time. That's a special bottle. That was a great bottle of wine. That's a great choice. And by the way, it was one that I considered. So it would have been funny if we both chose that. I think that's a great pick. Flamme Noble is their flagship wine. It's always fantastic, but that 2010 was special stuff. I mean, I think, and I had it recently, and I remember the first time I had it, and I don't remember the last time I had it. It's a wine you know where you were when you drank it.
yes,
So I think
I
it's a good choice.
a few of them, and I have one left. And I remember having this the last time about 3 years ago and saying, "Oh, it's in its drinking window, but I think it needs a few more years until it really maximizes its potential." And I think now is the time.
So this is your last one.
My last bottle.
Well, enjoy it. Enjoy every last sip of it. That's
You're
great stuff.
welcome to come join.
I hope someone that deserves it is with you when you open that.
Absolutely.
I chose. I hope it's still good, honestly. But I have a 1997. No one expects to hear 19 at the beginning, and it is Israeli, and it's Dalton Reserve Cab,
Wow.
1997. And I have one of them. I've had it for a long time. I have not tasted it in a very long time. This bottle, I know some of my. I know Yossi Horowitz and Gabe Geller. They hold that in very high esteem, and I was able to get my hand on another one. And I've kind of been, I guess, in my head, holding it for one of them to visit. I think Yossi has even told me, he's like, "Do not open that without me," because I know in talking to him that was a one of those wines to him that like really like changed your thinking in whatever way. And it was a special wine. Dalton, as you mentioned earlier, is a great winery. It makes great wine, and I think that was probably a $25 or $30 wine. Um, whether it's still going to be good at 27 years old,
That's what I want to know. Do you think
we'll see.
you kept it too long?
I for sure kept it too long.
Okay, okay, that's what I'm wondering.
But
I
it's like I like experiments, and there is some line about no wine is too old, but it's meaning a wine may taste dead, but there are people that like even dead wine. It has certain characters to it. I can't remember what the line is, but there's some line about that some French famous guy said about wine that no wine is ever dead. Most people would disagree, but I certainly something that comes with drinking wine over a long period of time and that doesn't happen to everyone, is an appreciation for old wine and for the tertiary notes that come with old wine. And that's something I would not have enjoyed 20 years ago, that I very much do now when you get the, evolved wine. So
a little bit of
we'll see, but I'm very excited to open this wine. I mean, very excited. And to be totally honest and upfront in our podcast, I can't guarantee I'm going to open it now. That is my Moshiach choice. But I did kind of promise Yossi Horowitz that I would open it with him. So it may happen, but we'll see. If not, I have some other choices, but we're not going to get into that. That is my, like, when I was looking down in my cellar, and I'm like, that wine is set apart for that reason. It's a Moshiach wine to me. It's Israeli. It's a special wine. I can't wait to taste it. I can't wait to taste it.
I am amazed that you have a wine from the 90s. Somebody recently brought me a Yarden from the early 90s.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I don't know if you should open it. I think you should just keep it because
Yeah.
it's just amazing to have. And if you open it, we'll know if it's good or not. Maybe it's better just to not know and just keep it as part of your collection.
Well, sometimes, when in talking to people and they tell me they have these, I'm like, oh, awesome. I'm like, where were you storing? And they're like, it was under my sink or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, yeah, we'll see. Maybe it'll be good. But I had that happen to me one time. Guy brought me to his house and like he literally went under his sink. He had some wine sitting down there, and it was a really great wine, but it was cooking under his sink for like 10 years. Anyway, but I have at least one older wine, and that's the 1990 Gan Eden that was
Yes.
made by Craig Mitchell. I think one left. I have one left. And
few of those. I
that's
have
really-
2 or 3 left.
that's a very interesting story. We'll discuss another time. But that is I have probably a few bottles from the '90s. But as the evolving world of kosher wine, we'll have more and more of those. In 20 years, people will have older collections and bottles that were really meant to age for that many years. Not that many were made, let's say, in the 1980s that even had the possibility to be good 20 years later. Now those wines, and over the last 20 plus years, those wines have been made. So we shall see.
Well, I think I approve of your selections, and I think that those are really fantastic wines. And I think we should put them in the show notes so that people have a list of the
Yeah,
wine we chose.
absolutely. This was fun. I like this idea. We could do something similar again, but we were thinking. I'm like, let's get another one in before Pesach. This is the optimal wine time, and let's focus on Israel and on Israeli wines. And this was great. I think it was a great idea.
Yeah, something that we're doing here, we did a beautiful little fundraiser for an Israeli organization, is we actually made stickers for the wines that people can buy, and you can put a sticker of either a hostage or a fallen soldier. And I think that maybe that's something as part of the Israeli wine experience to think of one of the hostages who, God willing, will be out and be able to have a Seder. But if heaven forbid, for whatever reason, by Monday night, they are not out unscathed and they're not able to have a Seder, that we should think of them, and that we should, and that just to acknowledge, maybe even to mention one, big numbers, and we learned this over the course of Jewish history. Big numbers, we don't know; they become stats, but actually talking about one person, one individual, one hostage, one fallen soldier, I think maybe that's a good idea for the Seder. Just mention one person by name, honor them, respect them, and it's a nice way to share with the family and also to celebrate while we're all in pain.
Fantastic idea. Believe Neder, I will do the same thing.
This is great to be here with you. I thank you for this little impromptu episode, and I can't wait to hear what you guys think of it. And if you have any ideas, thoughts, questions, kosherwinepodcast@gmail.com. It's that simple. And I want to tell you, I'm not going to lie, I kind of refresh every so often. I'm like, did anybody care about us? Do they care about us?
Well, because we've both been getting lots of messages,
Yeah.
and I love it. I love the feedback. I'd love to hear anyone else's choices in these categories. I think it's a great topic. I'd love to see other people's thoughts, what they would choose in each of those categories. So we'd love to hear from you.
And for those,
I was just going to say we love fan mail. That's all.
we love it. Okay, Kenny, I wish you a Chag Kosher V'Sameach, or in Yiddish we say a kosher and freilich and Pesach. As the old saying goes, if you're at a program, you're gonna have to say a freilich and Pesach. If you're at a kosher Pesach. If you're at your in-laws, you have to say a freilich and Pesach. And if you're with your in-laws at a program, you just say Pesach.
I will not laugh at that because my in-laws are probably listening to this podcast.
And my in-laws are also, but
I don't even get the joke. I don't even get the joke. All right, a Chag Kosher V'Sameach to you and to everyone listening, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Absolutely.